January the 15th, pondlife. In January, when there is such an absence of animal activity on the ground, it is a surprise to see how much is going on below the surface of the pond. There is always a proliferation of life where land meets water, and even in the depths of winter, at the edge of a London pond, the same is true. Although in much smaller numbers than later in the year, there are still a whole host of tiny active animals and plants to be seen. In the water itself, there are water fleas, Daphnia species, and copepods, for example, cyclops, which are easily visible with the naked eye. Under a microscope, the beating heart of the former can be quite clearly seen. In among dead vegetation, water lice, the Selus aquaticus, are often abundant, as are lesser numbers of water mites, mollusks, and mayfly, damselfly, and caddisfly larvae. The surface of the muddy ooze is the best place to take samples, using a pipette to catch amoebae, flagellates, ciliates, rotifers, oligochaetes, and nematode worms. On the surface meniscus of pondfeds, of spring-fed ponds such as those on Keston Common, there are often large numbers of springtails, looking a little like dancing sot. The edges of rivers have an equally rich assemblage of animals and plants, which even in January usually include some water shrews, Cambrus pulex, sticklebacks, as well as some mollusks and leeches. Many of the most surprising and captivating creatures in a pond are a mere hundredth or thousandths of a centimetre long. With a microscope needed to see them, they were unknown to almost anyone until the 18th century and are still largely unknown to most Londoners today. The variety of shape, form, and mobility of these tiny creatures is truly immense. With a little practice, even amoebas can be seen with the naked eye moving across the surface of a glass sampling jar. Often thought of as the simplest form of life, it is quite mesmerizing to watch under a microscope these colorless dots of protoplasm gently flowing across a glass surface and then engulfing any prey in their path with their arm-like pseudopodia. Other than the surface and the mud, it is also worth taking samples from semi-decayed pieces of submerged vegetation. The variety in algal flora in such situations can be immense. It is particularly worth looking for diatoms, which have many different sculptural shapes, but are also noted for their beautiful patterns on their silica cell walls. Other algae with interesting shapes include the desmids, and in mild winters, blooms of the desmid Stephanodiscus astrea occur in London's reservoirs. Other common algae, such as Spirogyra with its spiral crowdcasts, are filamentous and immobile, whereas species such as Chromidomonas can be seen moving rapidly around mud particles, using their small whip-like threads to project themselves. Darwin recorded 537 different species in a single cup of mud. Flatworms. There are 8 species of free-living flatworm to be found in London's ponds and rivers. The one most likely to be seen is Polycetus nigra. It is a black flattened worm with a wedge-shaped head, which is usually first noticed gliding along the surface of the glass sampling jar. This gliding motion is achieved by vast numbers of tiny moving threads called cilia, which cover its surface. Polycetus nigra, unlike some of the other species, is typically deep black, and so its internal organs cannot be seen, although its eye spots can. About up to 30 of these eyes along its front edge, and others continuing down the side of its body. These onlooking worms have a number of other unusual features. If a worm that has learned how to locate a particular food is killed and then fed to another, the worm that ate it acquires the same skill. To eat these worms, they extrude their pharynx from their mouth at first to sample a piece of carrion, and then draw the food back into their body to digest it. In pale species such as Dendrocilum lacteum, a patterned multi-branched gut is quite visible. This may be different colors depending on what the worm has recently eaten. Dendrocilum lacteum is one of the 4 species that can be found in the ponds and Bookham Common. Flatworms are also famous for their powers of regeneration. When cut into several pieces, each piece will regrow into a new worm. Some are even known to tear themselves apart as a method of reproducing themselves. Other species, such as Dungisia tigrina and Digesia polychroma are found under stones in London's rivers. It is their shiny, round, flattened egg discs attached to stones that we usually notice first.